Here is what I know. When that bell tolls again, I need to go make something, anything. A poem, a pie, a terrible scarf with my terrible knitting. I need to write a letter, remind myself of any little lifeline around me. When death sounds, I forget most of what I learned before. I go below. I compare my echoes with other people's happiness. I carve that hole in my own chest again, pull out all my organs once again, wonder if they'll ever work again, stuff them back again, begin again. That poem is called The Lifeline by Patrick Otwama, and to me it is one of the most powerful articulations of grief. A few months ago, a recent graduate from my school was hit by a car and killed, and her family reached out to my school's performance poetry team to perform at her funeral. Because when the world is at a loss for words, they reach for us. The world needs us. The world needs poets. Every single one of us has a poet inside of us. And today, I'm going to show you how to unlock it. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. For a long time, I did not think that I could ever be a poet. I'm an actor, so I am comfortable with memorizing other people's words and putting myself in someone else's shoes. Poetry intimidated me because the idea of trusting my own voice was scary. When you perform poetry, the character is you, and you can't hide. But the more I wrote, the more I realized that vulnerability is what makes poetry so powerful. Once that mental switch flipped for me, a whole new world opened up. I had the courage to perform in slam events, and I became a teen ambassador for the Get Lit organization in Los Angeles, which promotes teen literacy through performance poetry. What I have found is that when teens have the opportunity to write and perform poetry in a safe environment, amazing things happen. And amazing things have happened for me. Poetry allows us to process and access our emotions. It's therapeutic, it's healing, it's powerful. Now, the performance element of performance poetry is crucial because other people are hearing your work. It's reaching people and resonating, and there's a human connection. One reason that I initially found poetry to be so intimidating was that I thought that there was one right way of doing it, and I was worried about fitting into that right box. But once I realized that and accepted the fact that I naturally have a more conversational performance style and casual writing style, everything changed for me. There is no one right way to write and perform poetry. It is just a matter of finding what is authentically you and what you have to say. Now, that may seem like a lot to ask, but it's not as hard as it seems. It's really just a matter of getting started. Here are the steps that worked for me. First, watch poetry and get inspired. Some of my favorite poetry YouTube channels are Button Poetry, Get Lit, and Youth Speaks. You'll start to find poets whose style and content really resonate with you. Some of my favorite poets are Sarah Kay, Patrick Roche, and Phil Kay. But there are thousands of wonderful poets out there to watch and learn from. The next step is to write out a list of things that you are the most passionate about. This can be social causes, identity, relationships, emotions, or all of the above. I have written poetry about my sister moving away for college, about social justice issues like gun violence and women's rights, and I even recently wrote a poem from the perspective of Lady Macbeth while preparing to play her. What I have found is that the best poetry is written in the moment, when you have just experienced an extreme emotion that you need to process. Now, these emotions don't necessarily have to be sadness or anger. Poems about joy and love and the little things in life can be just as powerful. Write as a way to put your feelings into words. Think of your paper or your laptop as a free therapist who's available to you 24/7. Now, your goal when you write should be to better understand yourself. Don't write for anyone else. Sharing it should be the icing on the cake, not the main point. Avoid writing what you think other people will want to hear. Remember that if it's authentic, it's going to resonate with people. Also, don't judge what you write. Just let it flow. If it doesn't initially sound flowery or poetic enough, you may just naturally, like me, have a more conversational writing style, and that's okay. Now, a step that has been crucial for me is finding my writing safe space. For me, my favorite way to come up with poetry is to piece it together on walks with my dog. There he is, my little writing buddy. Now, the more you write, the sooner you will find your own writing safe space, your own place and time when your creative juices can flow and you can really get in the zone. Now, once you've followed all of those steps and have a strong foundation, the next step in performing your poetry is to find a classic poem. Now, the classic response poem is common in poetry slams. And a classic poem is any poem written by another poet that you perform. A common misconception is that a classic poem has to be old, when in reality, contemporary poems are actually more common. Now, the classic poem, it's really important that it resonates with you, because it's going to be what inspires your response poem. The classic poem, also, it's really important to know that if you're performing in a poetry slam, accuracy counts for points, because you want to make sure that you're properly representing the poet's work. There are countless poetry anthologies online, and there are countless poetry anthologies online, and if you enter a poetry slam, they will usually have a bank of poems for you to choose from. Now, once you have chosen your classic poem, the next step is finding a response poem. A response poem is based on the classic and is typically performed right after. It answers a question that's posed in the classic, or it could even be related in something as simple as structure, or key lines, or repetition, or rhythm. Again, there's no right or wrong way of doing this, as long as the connection between the two is clear. What's neat about a response poem is that accuracy does not matter, because they are your own words. So if you mess up, nobody's going to know. Now, the poem that I performed at the very beginning of my talk was an example of a classic poem that resonated with me. I lost my grandma to cancer 4 years ago, and that emptiness and pain was something that 12-year-old me didn't know how to wrap my head around or define, and it was definitely something that I did not want to talk about. It took me 4 years and writing a response to this classic poem to finally process my grief. Otuama's The Lifeline resonated with me because when my grandma died, a part of me died with her. I felt like the magic of my childhood had disappeared. I kept thinking about the lost traditions, the fact that I would never hear her voice again, and the horror of another family living in her house. I was afraid of losing the little memories of all of the little things that reminded me of her. And that's what kept that hole in my chest that Otuama refers to from healing. When I wrote this response poem and was able to articulate those little memories, it lifted that burden. Every time I perform this poem, I feel like I'm bringing those memories back to life, and it helps me heal. My response poem is called Ode to My First, Last Goodbye. To the first, second home I ever had. To the red front door and the painted rocks displayed like jewels in a border around it. My granddaughter made those, she'd tell people. to the green beanbag chair that swallowed me whole, to the Christmas tree corner of the living room left unfurnished until 2 days after Thanksgiving, to the pile of gifts that gradually made its way under the tree until Christmas Eve, when 6 pairs of grubby little hands would tear open the wrapping paper and pull out this year's pair of Christmas pajamas, to the nights spent falling asleep to old VHS tapes and the emotional wound that never healed after watching Old Yeller for the first time, to the wall of pantry shelves that seemed to tower on forever as I would crane my neck toward the ceiling, trying to find anything that wasn't unsweetened, to the unsweetened hot cocoa powder, sweetened with a spoonful of honey, and the early mornings spent in front of the fireplace while Grandma read the paper and I sat wishing for a sweeter drink. To the healthiest person I knew, getting a diagnosis she didn't deserve. To the doctor who said 6 months like some bad metaphor for 2. To the truth behind the cliche of how quickly time moves. To my first last goodbye. The kiss on the forehead and choking back tears, unable to tell her what I wanted to say because sometimes feelings can't be translated into words. To pulling out of the driveway for the last time. Knowing that no new memories would be made in that little house. Watching the red front door get smaller and smaller until I could close one eye and hold it between my fingers. Knowing that my rocks wouldn't be jewels to anyone else. Picturing a coffee table invading the Christmas tree corner. Wishing Old Yeller was the cause of my tears, and that my grandma was there to wipe them away. Now it's your turn. Your story is already there. It's painted on your soul and written on your heart. Now you just need to give it a voice. So go in, poet. You've got this. Thank you.